Welcome inside the Wednesday edition of Big Ten Today, presented by Old National Bank, alongside Michael Huff. I'm Rick Pizzo. Mike, we have gotten here really quickly. It seemed like it was just yesterday that we were talking about being in the middle of the Big Ten season. So much was still to be decided. Now just 3 conference games left for everybody.
Yeah, and I think things are pretty well being decided. We know 6 teams are definitely in. We know there's 4 that are vying for 2. It's going to be a very exciting last 3 games.
That's because, remember, the Big Ten tournament next week starts on Tuesday in Omaha, and the top 8 teams at the end of the Big Ten regular season in those standings earned the chance to play in Omaha. Now, right now, there's a tight battle at the top. Indiana and Maryland, as we show you the big story, it is a big look at the standings. Those 2 squads, 15-6, each 1 game in the loss column ahead of Iowa. Now, mathematically, both Rutgers, Nebraska still have a chance, as does Michigan. If you break down all the math, you see Illinois and Michigan State just above that blue line. That signifies the teams that would be part of the Big Ten tournament next week. The teams below would not be part. Purdue and Michigan State, the identical record, but Michigan State right now holds the tiebreaker. Minnesota also trying to get into that mix. And when you look at Illinois, remember, the Illini are done. They don't play any conference games this weekend, so they cannot improve. They cannot worsen that 12-12 record. So those are the standings heading into the final weekend of the regular season. This is the schedule. Games to be played Thursday through Saturday. Indiana, Maryland, both on the road, both against teams that they will be heavily favored against. That Nebraska-Purdue series should be fascinating. Michigan-Ohio State is always interesting. Iowa needs nothing short of a sweep against Northwestern. Probably say the same thing for Rutgers as they travel to Minnesota to take on the Gophers. So you have all that information in your noggin, at least we hope you do, or maybe that you had written it down, because Mike Huff is now going to take us through series by series to break down what we need to be watching and what each team needs to do. Mike, let's start with Indiana on the road against Michigan State, but you look at the Hoosiers, they're red hot, and you look at the Spartans, they have gone cold at just the wrong time.
It's so true, and it's so frustrating for everyone up in Sparty land that you think about the fact that this team unfortunately has been swept the last 2 weekends. They were sitting in such a good spot. I want to say 3rd in the Big Ten at one point, just it seems like yesterday. And now the good news is that they're coming home. You know what? They got swept at Illinois. They got swept by Indiana. Indiana 8 in a row. What I love about Indiana right now, too, is of those 8 wins, 5 have had their pitchers hold the opposition to 3 runs or less. So we've always known how good they are hitting. Their pitching is what's been erratic, and seeing them start to hit their stride, there's a reason they're tied for first right now. And again, when you think about Michigan State, you're finally coming home. This is a club that really needs to do a little bit of everything right. Find that magic they had earlier in the year. Those top 2 guys getting on base, Farquhar, Jeb, letting Vredenberg just continue to rake. We're going to talk about a couple other guys, but if they're at home, hopefully they can find some magic.
I don't think Indiana really has anything to worry about, even if they don't get the auto bid. They're high enough in the RPI. They've certainly done enough through the course of the season to get an at-large bid into the NCAA tournament. But any type of stumble against Michigan State or next week in Omaha, and you can see that seeding drop, and that does make a big-time difference in terms of where you are playing and who you are playing against in the first round of the NCAAs at regional. I mentioned Nebraska and Purdue, which really could be a fascinating series because Purdue is jockeying to try to get inside that top 8. Really important for the Boilermakers. But Nebraska, a little bit like Michigan State, was a team, Mike, that it wasn't long ago. They were at the top of the standings. They were one of the hottest teams, not just in the Big Ten, but really in all of Division I baseball. They've kind of leveled off as the season has worn off. How do you see this series kind of playing out?
Well, I look at this series, and for Nebraska, I really feel like for them, this is going to be how do we position ourselves going into the tournament. Again, one of those 6 that we know is in, still has a chance for that #1 seed. But how is Will Bolt going to get these guys to kind of right the ship a little bit? And I don't mean right the ship like huge change of direction. It's the little things like we just talked about. How do they do on the mound? Again, we've been a little bit erratic, and we're going to be talking about some of their pitchers a little bit later in the show. But can their bats continue to stay hot? Can it be all 9, not just the Bryce Matthews, the Max Andersons? And if that happens, Nebraska is going to be in a really good spot to take 2 out of 3, maybe sweep. And for Purdue. Again, you just got swept. You have battled. This is a team under 500 overall, but they are the Big Ten team that plays the best small ball, which means they're going to be in every game. They can bunt, they can execute, they can hit and run. And so somehow they got swept last weekend. You would hate to see their season come down to being swept the last 2 weekends and them being in that 6th, 7th spot most of the year. Now they're in 9, and it'd be a shame if they didn't make the tournament.
Another team that has grabbed our attention as of late, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, because Steve Owens and this squad had such a great year in 2022. The beginning of 2023 was a little bit slower than we expected, but now you look at them at 13-8, more than 30 wins in the regular season. After a nice push here, they go on the road to Minnesota. Guys like Chris Brito and Ryan Lasko. I mean, the bats are coming alive. This is a very dangerous team at this point in the year.
Well, you think about the fact that they now, as you just said, they're winners of 7 of their last 8 games. This was a team that, again, predicted by the other coaches in the Big Ten, top 2 or 3, and it was such a disappointment last year with the 45 wins, not getting into the tournament. So this year, having stumbled, what's nice is the teams they've stumbled against non-conference, both are nationally ranked, and the losses they had against them were very close losses, so they could have won those. But right now, Brito is healthy. Lasko has been solid all year. And what I like is that their pitchers are really starting to come into form. That for Rutgers right now, Steve Owens has to be saying, kind of like Nebraska, we know we're in, but we take 2 out of 3. We sweep this weekend. We're going to position ourselves really into a good spot going into that tournament with a lot of confidence both on the mound and with the bat.
And if Minnesota wants to make the tournament, there's still a chance, but they probably have to be thinking sweep this weekend because otherwise you need a ton of help from everybody else to try to get into the Big Ten tournament. Iowa, Nebraska, this one's really all about Iowa, or Northwestern, I should say. It's been a rough year for the Wildcats. They will see their season end after this weekend. But as for the Hawkeyes, they're playing for something a little bit bigger.
They really are. I mean, Iowa also was one of those teams that from the Big Ten, they got into the national rankings and then unfortunately had a bad weekend. They were out of it. They're a team that at the time beat the #1 ranked LSU Tigers. But their pitchers have also been incredibly erratic. Probably the best 3 arms for starters of any Big Ten team. And the question is, you had more. You had Langenberg. You had Brody Breck get you 5 and 6 innings last weekend. Now you're going to go to Northwestern. Again, a team that you know you should beat, a team you probably feel like you should sweep. But more importantly, can all 3 starters have one more good outing so that as they go into the Big Ten tournament, they feel very confident they have a chance not only to win it, but win a couple. And again, start to think about seeding when you get to the NCAA tournament.
Another team that's confident, that's thinking about seeding because they're going to be an NCAA team, the Maryland Terrapins. They come off taking 2 or 3 against Minnesota at home. Now they go on the road to finish the season against Penn State. We spoke with Matt Shaw earlier this week. Great young man, great hitter. You look at the rest of this lineup, whether it's LaRusso, whether it's Hakopian, whether it's guys setting the table at the, 1 through 9, they are as dangerous as any team in this conference.
Well, and again, this is a team that feels like an Indiana that's going to be led by the bats, but you have to stop and take a step back and say, you know what, they have 3 great arms as their starters. And again, unfortunately, just been a little inconsistent. The most surprise, I think, for all of us this year is watching Jason Savacool, a kid last year who threw a no-hitter, who you really felt like was going to be your #1 starter, and he has struggled, and struggled mightily in a lot of different ways, a lot of bad breaks and things like that. But knowing that you've got this freshman Kyle McCoy, knowing you have a solid Nick Dean, if Jason Savacool, if those guys can find their stride this last weekend against a Penn State team, again, that they have to be thinking about winning the series and sweeping. If those 3 can do it, I think Maryland's going to be looking really good.
Last series, very quickly, about 30 seconds here. I know it hasn't been the year Ohio State expected, but Tracy Smith and this Michigan team, you just never know.
Well, it's strange to think this is the last series we want to talk about, and it's a Michigan-Ohio State. Ironically, Ohio State better RPI. Both teams are 3 games over 500, so we'll see what happens. Throw the records out with these 2 guys.
6 and 15 versus 13 and 8, because Michigan, of course, 26 and 23 overall. It was not the non-con that the Wolverines had expected early in the year. It's been a pretty amazing year for Big Ten softball, and it continues this week into the NCAA regionals. You see the 4 Big Ten teams that earned NCAA invites. All these double elimination series will begin on Friday. Look at that, Knoxville Regional. The Indiana Hoosiers, after an historic year for IU, take on Louisville first. That is in the Knoxville Regional, where #4 national seed Tennessee is the host. But Tennessee does not have anybody on their roster who was both player and freshman of the year in their conference. Indiana can boast that. Taryn Kern comes in and in year number 1 pulls off a very rare double, being named both the Big Ten Player and Freshman of the Year. And we are extremely excited for today's big interview with Taryn Kern, who joins us from Bloomington. And Taryn, I understand you had to make sure that your mom knew that this interview was coming, so you were just texting. Can we confirm that she's either watching and or has this on record?
Oh yeah, she's watching right now.
Okay, good. So now we can officially continue the interview because she's watching back on the West Coast in California. You're from Sacramento area. Your dad played baseball at Gonzaga, I understand. So how did that happen for you to go from being on the West Coast like that to playing softball in Bloomington?
Yeah, I mean, the coaches here at Indiana, they found me, they contacted me. It was during COVID, so we'd really only been talking over Zoom, but I just fell in love with the campus, basically online, and just love what they were doing here.
It was a really quick and seemingly easy transition for you from high school to college. At least that's what it seemed like for us watching from the outside. How was the transition for you in getting that comfortable that you were able to kind of accomplish what you were able to accomplish pretty quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I really just set my mind to a goal, really just to have the best freshman season I could, and I know I could do it. And just coming to Indiana, it definitely was an adjustment, but I love the Midwest now, and just the fan base at Indiana is really unlike anything I've ever seen on the West Coast.
So talk to me about that adjustment and how quickly you were able to integrate yourself with your team. Obviously, we've seen freshmen come in and do good things on great teams in the past, but there is that chemistry aspect. So how quickly did you feel like you and the rest of the veterans on this team were gelling together?
Yeah, I mean, it happened really quickly, and they were super welcoming when I came here, and definitely up the middle to have that chemistry with Brooke Benson, to make those double plays, to have her back, her have my back in the lineup, to hit behind Cora Bassett and Taylor Minnick behind me, just knowing that if I can't get it done, the rest of my lineup will, the rest of the team will.
Yeah, you talked about Taylor Minnick, obviously one of those players that's also having a great year at the plate. You guys feed off each other a little bit. You're more of the power hitter. You lead the Big Ten in home runs, RBIs, slugging percentage, but you also hit for average. You and Taylor, two of only 4 players in the league to be above 400. So what's your focus? I know it changes pitch to pitch and pitcher to pitcher, but what's your general approach when you dig in?
I mean, I just think sticking to my plan, knowing that my preparation is that I prepared more than the pitcher, that I'm ready for the moment, and just getting it done.
Do you have an opposing pitcher that you faced this year that you thought had the nastiest stuff, someone who was maybe the toughest to deal with, even with as much success as you had at the plate?
Yeah, I mean, there's some great pitchers in the Big Ten this year. We saw this weekend Daniel Williams, Autumn Pease with some nasty changeups. So just to try to battle those off, yeah, they're both great pitchers. Autumn Pease, pitcher of the year. So.
You know, I talked with Kayla Chavez of Minnesota about Autumn Pease the other day, and I asked her about comparing those two changeups because it's maybe the pitch that we've heard the most about in this league coming from pitchers is Danielle Williams' changeup the last couple of years and Autumn Pease's this year. How do they differ? How are they similar?
Yeah, I mean, I think Danielle, she's just really spinny. It's more of a slower changeup. You can barely see it out of the hand. So sometimes you start to swing and, you know, you can't really tell it's a changeup. And Pease just having that velocity difference from her hard stuff to the changeup is, I think, the difference there. Yeah,
well, you figured it out pretty much regardless of who you've been facing. You had a 23-game win streak as a team this season, set a program record, one of the longest we've seen in the country in a long time. What was the most enjoyable part of that streak, being a part of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously super fun to win, and just to do that with my teammates, to just go on an offensive streak like that for our pitchers to step up was just really exciting for our team and for the Hoosiers.
Now, at the very end of that streak, you set the new Indiana home run record with your 17th of the year. And I should point out you did that very early in April, so you had a ton of play left for the rest of the season. But how cool was it for you to know that you had kind of written your name in the record book so early in your freshman year?
Yeah, I mean, to break a record that was set by an Olympian, Michelle Venturella, it's just super special, and I'm so grateful for that opportunity and to just be helping my team and to really make a statement this weekend in regionals.
Did you feel any pressure? Because I'm sure you heard about the record the week or 2 weeks leading up to it. Did you feel it ever when you were inside the box thinking about trying to hit home runs or trying to actually get it out of your mind?
I mean, definitely, I feel like freshman year you have to overcome a lot of mental challenges, but to just accept that, you know, I'm ready for this moment and that I'm going to get it done, and to just stick to my approach to be able to do it. And it was such a special moment to celebrate with my teammates.
They talked about also playing inside the middle of the infield, not just some great moments at the dish, but you had one of the biggest viral moments, I think, in all of Big Ten softball, maybe in the country this year, that dugout catch in the rivalry game against Purdue. I'm sure you've been asked about it a million times, but I'm curious, how much do you actually remember it? Not watching the video and saying, oh, yeah, that's exactly what happened. Do you remember the play itself and what you were thinking as you were headed toward the dugout?
I mean, when I saw that ball in the air, I knew that I was going to catch it, and I was going to go as hard as I could. And I just remember catching the ball and just being like, oh, you got to hang on to this. And when I opened my eyes, I was down the dugout stairs, and my trainer was actually right there. And she's like, you good? And I was like, yep, I'm good. And I just walked out and showed the ball, and yeah, made the catch.
Did you realize shortly thereafter that it had gone viral? Did you find it? Did somebody have to show you? I mean, it was kind of blowing up on social media.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of cool to just have some of my friends from high school, even middle school, family friends, just text me and be like, hey, I saw your play on SportsCenter Top 10 at this restaurant, and just things like that. Was a really cool moment.
I know you guys continued such a great run through the course of the regular season, ending up as the #2 seed, making it all the way to the championship game at the Big Ten tournament. How much did you kind of allow yourselves to be disappointed about the finish against Northwestern before you wiped it from your mind and got ready for the regionals?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was a tough loss, but I think our team, we knew we battled till the very end, and we were super proud of ourselves for that. We had a great run, and we're just excited to bounce back and really make a statement here in Knoxville this weekend.
And I understand you're leaving shortly. You're headed out on Wednesday afternoon to get to Knoxville for that opening game on Friday, and then hopefully a run into Sunday's regional championship game. What's the prep been like since you guys heard your name called in the selection show, you knew the regional that you were going to, and now you're getting ready to depart for the site of those games?
Yeah, I mean, I think just having that preparation, knowing we're ready, and just fine-tuning the little things, you know, getting our mental right, and just being ready to, yeah, really make a statement this weekend.
How relaxed do you want to be? I mean, I think you guys exceeded everybody's expectations, maybe except for your own inside the locker room this year. So what's the balance between really wanting to continue to play and being relaxed and also enjoying what you've accomplished to this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think for this weekend specifically, Coach was talking about how the pressure's all in Tennessee this weekend. You know, they're top 10 in the nation, hosting a regional. So for us to go in there and, you know, nobody's expecting us to win. I mean, obviously our fans, and we know that we can, but just to go in there and to just play free and loose and just do what we know we can at the plate.
Indiana, Taryn Kern, the Big Ten freshman and player of the year. Hard to believe she's a freshman, both in the way that she handles the interview and the way she handles the bat and the glove inside the field. Taryn, I can promise that your mom is right now at home, very proud of not just what you've done this year on the field, but the interview and how you handle yourself as well. So we appreciate the time, and we wish you and the Hoosiers the best of luck this weekend in Knoxville.
All right, thank you. Go Hoosiers.
We are back on Big Ten today with the Big Stat presented by Old National Bank. Matthew Wilkinson, what a weekend at the Big Ten Men's Outdoor Track and Field Championship. I mean, Minnesota has dominated the steeple as of late. His first Big Ten title in the steeple, but he backed it up the next day in the 5K. Fifth steeple title for the Gophers in the last 6 championships dating back to 2018. And we are excited to be joined by the aforementioned Matthew Wilkinson from the Twin Cities. Matthew, welcome into the show. You are the only athlete at the Big Ten Men's Outdoor Track and Field Championships to win 2 individual gold medals. And as I mentioned, you did them on back-to-back days with the steeple on Saturday and the 5K on Sunday. How long does it take your body to recover from a double like that?
I'll tell you what, I'm still recovering today, so it'll probably be through the end of the week here that we'll have to take things pretty easy, and might get a little workout in, but we'll be taking it pretty chill. So, yeah, definitely still focusing on recovery, trying to do everything right to get my legs right before the regional meet next week.
And obviously you don't have that luxury when you're at the meet because you had around 24 hours in between the steeple and the 5K. So what's the goal, and how, as an athlete, do you get your body back to where it needs to be, back to baseline before you go and run that 5,000 meter?
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of got to do everything right. You got to hydrate, eat well in between the races. We're lucky to have a really good training staff and trainers and massage therapists there to kind of work on us too and make sure we get the legs right. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be feeling 100% when you toe the line that second time. So you just got to deal with it and kind of just mentally prepare and not be feeling 100%. And yeah.
So let's go back to your meet chronologically, and I'll start with the steeple on Saturday. Everybody knows the 5K because it's a race, it's running, but you look at the steeplechase, and it's certainly one of the more unique events in all of track and field. When did you first learn of it? When did you first start to train for it? When did you know you'd be pretty good at it?
So I started doing it when I got to college. So I was at Carleton College before being at the U, and that's where they kind of started me in it. People don't really do it in Minnesota in high school. So, but I had been hurdling here and there, so I knew that I could jump. I also played some basketball, so had a little bit of hops compared to maybe some of the other distance runners. But yeah, so I started doing it in my freshman year at Carleton, and you know, I wasn't that good at it right at first, but after a couple of years of doing it, it's a really steep learning curve. So I started getting pretty good there.
What was the most difficult aspect of the steeple to get used to?
Definitely the water pit. So you do one water pit per lap, and that one is it's pretty scary at first. You're jumping over a 4 or 5 foot deep pool there, and just trying to get as far out as possible. And yeah, it can be pretty scary. You don't want to slip. That barrier does get pretty slippery there too when it's wet. So yeah, it's a little scary, but you just gotta be confident and attack it every time. Have
you ever had or seen any epic fails in the steeple? Because it seems like a race that just sets up for some pretty bad stuff if it's not handled perfectly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a dangerous race, and I know of some people who have broken legs and even arms doing the steeplechase. Fortunately, that hasn't been me. I've had a couple of decent little falls here and there, but mostly just scraping the surface or getting a little track burn, but nothing too bad. I've definitely fallen into that water a few times, but the water kind of braces your fall, so not too bad.
So how do you approach a race like the steeplechase differently, whether it's physically or mentally, than your standard 5K or any race that's just feet on a track going in an oval?
Yeah, so one thing they'll tell you about the 5K is you kind of just want to zone out and not put too much mental effort into it, just kind of find your guys to run behind and just kind of turn the brain off. Steeplechase isn't really like that, because if you turn the brain off, then you're going to end up running into those hurdles or with your face on the track. So yeah, it's definitely more of a mental grind, because you have to think, okay, got to get over the next hurdle, the water barrier. Yeah, just a lot more mental presence is necessary. And then overall athleticism, of course, too.
Which you obviously have. Also, as you mentioned, you're a basketball player as well. Let's focus now more on that Sunday 5K. You look at the pace and you break it down. I'm not a runner, nor am I much of a math guy, but I try to crank the numbers here between, you know, meters and how fast you're running per mile. And at 13:51, basically boils down to like 4.5 minute miles, something right around that pace, which for most people, Matthew, if that's accurate, is basically a dead sprint. I mean, how hard is that to kind of explain to people that you are sprinting at a regular pace for more than 3 miles?
It's tough, yeah. I mean, especially since my actual sprint pace isn't very fast either. So it is pretty much just kind of all out for me for that whole 5K there. But yeah, I mean, you kind of find your rhythm. You find different parts of your body to use than you do when you're all out sprinting, and just kind of try to relax as much as possible. And yeah, it's definitely not easy.
One of the things that blows me away is when you guys finish, I mean, I'm looking at you right there, it doesn't look like you're really breathing that hard. It looks like you could conduct a post-race interview some like 15, 30 seconds after you're done. Am I crazy, or is that the actual case?
Well, with a tactical race like that we had over the weekend, it is a little bit different kind of wear and tear on your body. So if I was really just going all out to try to run as fast as I could, you know, I'd probably be all out on the track, just in a little heap. But in that kind of race, you know, it was a lot of patience and just kind of waiting to really give it all out effort. And in that specific 5K, it was kind of that last 400 or 500 meters where the dead sprint really started, and we really started getting after it. So in that kind of race, it really doesn't take quite as much out of your body. So, but that said, I was still really tired, and I think the endorphins were kind of keeping me on my feet there at the end, and just the overall happiness with how it went.
You win by about 3.5 seconds, which maybe at first thought doesn't seem like that big a margin, but the margin between you and second was as big as the margin between second and fourth means obviously not part of the gold, silver, bronze podium deal. Did you feel at any point, you mentioned last 400 to 500 yards, did you feel at any point like you were really in control of this race, or when did you feel like you took control of the race?
You know, I kind of felt I was pretty confident with where I was at throughout the race. My coach just gave me the good advice to not really do any of the work up front and kind of just sit in the pack. So it wasn't until that last lap that I even had the lead at all. So, but I kind of felt like even though I was behind, I was still in control there, and I knew that when it came down to it, that I was going to have a pretty big kick available to me. And then Max Murphy from Iowa made a big move, and I was kind of, when he did that, I was like, oh, I can match this today. And then I was able to make a bigger move even with about 300 or 200 left. And yeah, so that's, I mean, really just those last 30 seconds of the race, I was like, I'm in control, and I was pretty confident with what I had left.
Obviously, I mentioned you're the only athlete from any school to win 2 individual titles, but others on your team had terrific meets. Keon Benjamin on the men's side, Amira Young on the women's side. You look at some of the field events. You know, we talked with Costas Altos a couple of weeks ago. He once again, as expected, wins the hammer. The throwers had a great meet, as they've had a great year all year long. How good did the overall second place team finish, which is the best for the program, I believe, in a decade, feel to everybody that contributed?
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, I've been running track for a long time, and never have I experienced a meet like that where just the entire team is so invested in what everybody's throwing, running, jumping. We're just all so into it, and it's just easy to perform well when your teammates are there for you and they're also competing well, and the energy is just flying around the meet. And honestly, going into it, we thought we had a good chance at third. We knew Iowa and Nebraska were the really good teams to beat. We thought we could come in third, but we ended up having a crazy good meet, and we were able to just narrowly beat Iowa by a couple points there and finish as the second place team, which we were really happy with.
An amazing meet for the Gophers and for Matthew Wilkinson, the only 2-time individual winner at the Big Ten Outdoors, now getting ready for the regionals. He mentioned they're coming up next week in Sacramento. Matthew, wish you the best. All the luck that we can send you heading into the regionals. It's been great to catch up with you, learn a little bit about your regimen. An unbelievable weekend. Enjoy it, and best of luck throughout the course of the summer.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
What a comeback for Penn State men's lacrosse. If you turn the game on in the second quarter, you saw the Nittany Lions down 7-1 to Princeton, and then the defense goes on lockdown, outstanding goaltending, and timely scoring as Penn State advances with the 13-12 win over the Tigers, setting up an Elite 8 date with Army coming up this weekend. And for more on the win and what is still ahead for Penn State, welcome in head coach Jeff Tambroni. Jeff, first and foremost, congratulations on that win. I know you've put the emotions aside now after that amazing comeback, but take me back to the moments after that win and realizing what you guys had accomplished after the situation you found yourself in midway through that second quarter.
Yeah, I mean, we were elated to get out of there with a win. I mean, Princeton is such a good lacrosse team, and they were playing such good lacrosse at that time, coming off an Ivy League championship tournament. And, you know, we unfortunately, we were in that situation a couple of times throughout the course of the year. We went down 5 goals to Big Ten rival Johns Hopkins. We went down 3 goals in the first couple of minutes of a game against Stony Brook. So I think our guys have been there, unfortunately, but you know, the fact that they showed so much poise and were able to just stay the course and play the way that they knew what they were capable of was, we were just, you know, as a staff, just really proud at the moment and continue to be really proud of the accomplishments that they've had thus far.
So when you come back from a deficit like that and you take the lead, it's one thing, but when the opposing team comes back to tie it up again and you're knotted up at 12 and you score the eventual game winner to go ahead 13-12 with about 4 minutes left, what were those last 4 minutes like in terms of tension on the sideline and knowing that any play, any shot could be the ultimate difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a great point. I mean, the fact that these guys came back from a 7-1 deficit and then we get ourselves in there, grab a lead, and then all of a sudden give it back at 12-12, twice, first the 7-1 deficit, and then second when we give up the lead and get back in and then score that one to go up 13-12. Just spoke about the resilience of this team, and there's probably a couple of possessions at both ends. Defensively, I thought we managed it really well. Offensively, not so well, but thankfully for the defense, the way they played coming down the stretch, we did enough at both ends to just hang on. So that last 30 seconds, it was nice to have gotten the stop, get a turnover, and then be able to run out the clock in the offensive end, and then just watch our guys celebrate. A long coming celebration for an accomplishment against a great team.
TJ Malone, so many awards this year inside the Big Ten, and for great reason. He had another 6 points. It just seems like a night in, night out type thing with TJ. How has he been able to produce like that when on every given day, the opposing defense, he's going to be their number one focus?
Yeah, I mean, it goes way back with TJ. TJ just loves the game of lacrosse, and, he sat out the better part of a year and a half with some injuries, and it was a challenge just to watch him go through it. And, both mentally and physically, he went through a number of surgeries and, had a crossroad moment where he had to decide whether or not he wanted to come back, whether or not it was worth it to even play again. But he has just worked so hard. He works hard every single day, not just what we see on the practice field, but he gets up every morning, does wall ball, and does so much when nobody's watching, and I think it prepares him for those moments. And we knew coming into these games, especially down the stretch, that our leaders, our best players, were going to have to make plays, and other guys were going to have to follow in behind. And TJ was certainly that guy in the offensive end, and he's been that way all year. He's been super consistent in practice, which makes it a lot easier for us to prepare, and he's been super consistent in games, which I think relaxes everybody and brings out the best and confidence in our team.
Certainly brought out the best in Ethan Long in that game. He had 5 goals, and he had him on just 7 shots. Was that just one of those afternoons where offensively his shot was really dialed in, or what was it that allowed him to be so efficient?
I think part of it was proximity. He was, I would say the majority of his goals were probably 2 or 3 yards away from the goalie, and we got a lot of respect for Princeton's goalie. He, was one of the top 5 in save percentage coming in, and we knew we needed to shoot the ball from great angles, from great spots on the field. And I think his teammates did a great job. I think Ethan would be the first one to tell you that his teammates did a great job of setting him up into those areas. But I think Ethan was patient, and he made sure that his shot selection in terms of where he was on the field, the proximity to the goalie, was just dead on. And the best part is he just made the most of it. He was just super opportunistic throughout the course of the week, and thankfully it paid off on the weekend.
You mentioned Princeton's goaltender, but your own goaltender has been absolutely rock solid, more so than that this year. Jack Frocione, I've been practicing my French pronunciation for that one. He had 16 saves in the game. I mean, those who follow college lacrosse know if you're around that 50% number, you're doing a great job. I mean, he had 16 saves and gives up just those 12 goals. How good was he in that game? And overall, how much has he fueled your success this year?
Yeah, he's been a big part of our success this year. We would not be here where we are right now without Jack Frocione. And, like TJ Malone, he's just really consistent in his preparation. And I love the way he slows the game down, whether it's a scrimmage before the season started, or it's a non-conference game, or if it's a playoff game. He goes into his preparation, day in and day out the exact same way. There's no real secret formula. He just works really hard. He's got great focus. His mindset is just super tough. When he gives up a goal, he resets quickly. He does it in practice. He does it in games. And like TJ provides confidence in the offensive end, Jack provides a ton of confidence for the guys in the defensive end, and he exudes that confidence himself. He believes in himself every time the ball comes out of someone's stick that he's going to get to it. And I think it's contagious for us defensively and contagious for us as a team.
Jeff, when did you as a coach kind of realize that this team had not just the ability, but the confidence that you've talked about and the chemistry that's required to get through a league like this as the co-regular season champ, the number 1 seed in the tournament, and a team that's now 1 win away from going to the Final Four?
Yeah, it's tough when we didn't have a great year last year, so coming off of last year, there was great disappointment, but great hunger, and we're really proud of the way the guys responded over the course of the summer. It's been a long process, but each and every day they've come back and they've had the same mission and trust. They've been very mission focused on what we're trying to accomplish, and they've trusted each other and our coaching staff, and that has not wavered. I think once we reflected back on that kind of confidence in them and them backing us. I think that's when it started. But if I were to kind of pick a point throughout the course of the regular season, we traveled up to Yale, and that's a tough place to play. And Yale's gotten the best of us in the last couple of years, but the fact that we could go on the road, win a game at a really tough opponent, I think it gave our guys a lot of confidence coming on the bus, coming back home, and knowing that we could compete with some of the nation's best lacrosse teams. They continued on that path and won the next couple of games, one at home, one on the road against Cornell. And I think at that point, we had proven to ourselves, and that's kind of what we were aiming to do, that we could play at that level. And we had seen it in years past, 2020, 2019, that we had played at a really high level. And there's a lot of different names inside that locker room and on that field. But we felt like if we stayed healthy and the guys trusted one another and stayed focused, that this was possible. And a credit to them. Sometimes it's important to go out and believe in something that you don't necessarily see. But I think once we saw some of those results in that 3-game stretch, the guys really started believing even more so in the preparation and process, and it's just continued from there.
Jeff, your team, one of 4 squads from the Big Ten to be part of the 17-team field in the NCAA tournament, and now 3 play on into the Final 8, including the Johns Hopkins team that you shared the regular season title with, and the Michigan team that went through the Big Ten tournament bracket. How have you seen this league evolve since its inception?
Yeah, I would say this is probably the best I think it's ever been from top to bottom. There's just really no weeks off, and I think the fact that Michigan was picked dead last in our conference, and to see them play all the way through into the Big Ten championship, says a lot about the parity in our league. And I think every coach does a great job of preparing their young men. Every coach is relentless on the recruiting road, and I think the brand of Big Ten lacrosse has taken significant strides over the last number of years. So it's an exciting league to be a part of. It's a grueling league to be a part of, but I'm really proud of the 3 teams that are left, Johns Hopkins, Michigan, and Penn State, and hopefully each one of us will represent the Big Ten and our programs really well over the course of the weekend.
All right, Jeff, can't let you go without getting your thoughts on Army. Obviously, the Scout probably would have been a little bit easier if it were Maryland, because that's a team that you're intimately familiar with, but it's Army instead. What's your biggest concern in facing them?
They just play so hard. Everything that you would think of an Army team. I mean, we scrimmage them every year. Got a lot of respect in their coaching staff. Coach Albarisi does it as well as anyone does in college lacrosse, and we scrimmage them in January every year. We've been doing it for the last 12 years. So we have a pretty good feel and knowledge of them, but it's usually when we're both getting a feel for our teams and probably not, rolling out everything that we want to see throughout the course of the year. But I think everything that you would think of an Army team, just really hardworking, and they play really well as a team, that's who they are. So, I think at the end of the day, we know we're going to have our hands full. They're playing really well. Right now, they got a lot of momentum coming off the Patriot League Championship and a huge win against Maryland on the road. So they're playing with a lot of confidence. They got a lot of momentum. They're going to be a really, really tough opponent. But at the same time, I think our guys are really excited about the challenge and opportunity, and hopefully we'll prepare this week the same way we did against Princeton last week.
And that opportunity comes Penn State's way on Sunday, noon Eastern, in the NCAA quarterfinals against Army. Head coach Jeff Tambroni. Jeff, truly appreciate the time. Wish you and the team the best of luck this weekend against Army.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thursday, the Big Ten title race heats up with a huge baseball doubleheader. Told you right now, Maryland, Indiana tied at the top of the standings. Well, you can see both on Thursday, Maryland, Penn State, 5 Eastern, followed by Indiana, Michigan State. It is a Thursday night Big Ten baseball doubleheader. You can see it only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. As promised, we're back with Michael Huff to talk about those series and more. We discussed the team aspect earlier. Now we focus on individual players that probably need to step up for their teams for various reasons. And we start with Michigan State. You would think it's some of the guys that we've mentioned all year long, but you're going a little bit off the grid here with your Michigan State player that needs to click this weekend.
Well, as we talked about how they have struggled the last 2 weekends, Brian Brecker is going to be my guy, the catcher for Michigan State. He's doing great batting-wise, 320, second, third, fourth, home runs, RBIs, but he has to manage this pitching staff, get them to relax and calm down and find that magic they had earlier in the year if they want any chance to get into the tournament.
How difficult can that be when your team starts to go in a little bit of a tailspin, and that's what's happened to Jake Boss's team right now, to be the guy behind the dish, trying to make sure that everybody doesn't go too deep inside their heads.
It's kind of fun because these guys end up becoming psychologists as well as teammates. I mean, you're putting a hand on the back of one guy, you're kicking another one in the butt, because you have to understand which guys are going to get motivated, which guys are going to be able to focus on what they need to do to get the next guy out. So there's a lot of pressure, I think, on Brian to make sure this Michigan State team finishes the year strong.
And that is not easy to do against an Indiana lineup that is playing and hitting as well as it has all year long. Speaking of hitting well, you look at what Maryland has done, and there's a lot of guys in this lineup that can hurt you. But Matt Shaw and Nick LaRusso are basically the guys that you have to avoid at all costs if you're an opposing pitching staff.
Right, and the reason I have them as some of the guys that I really want to watch this weekend is because I want to see which of these two teammates is going to win the Big Ten title regular season for home runs. These guys have been going back and forth, left and right, and it's just been fun to see them kind of compete against each other as they're competing as teammates to help Maryland get into the position it is right now, being the only nationally ranked team in the Big Ten. So I'm going to have a lot of fun to see what happens. It's kind of nice that the smaller guy is leading the bigger guy, but we'll see where it ends up.
I love that Shaw described LaRusso's performance this year when I talked to him earlier this week as ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
And that's from a teammate to a teammate, and I'm sure that LaRusso would probably say the exact same thing against Shaw, Maryland, and Penn State this weekend from State College. Purdue has an interesting series, and you picked Mike Bolton Jr. as the guy the Boilermakers have to rely on. Why?
Well, for Mike Bolton Jr., here's your leadoff hitter. So again, harkens back to my playing days at Northwestern. Hitting about 280, but leading the team in runs scored, leading the team in stolen bases. This Chicago White Sox ace product, again, coming behind guys like Corey Ray, first rounder, Ed Howard, first rounder. Mike Bolton is the guy that if he gets on base, he can disrupt, he can make the Purdue team get ahead early, score in the middle innings, kind of give them confidence. And we talked about Purdue, probably the best small ball team. I want to watch Mike Bolton to see what he does if he can wreak some havoc on the base pass.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're a fan of the movie Office Space, but every time I see that name, no, you don't have to call me Michael. You can just call me Mike.
Just call me Mike.
Even though he's one of my all-time favorites. I like his entire catalog, his entire collection. All right, Purdue takes on Nebraska. We've talked a lot about Emmett Olson this year, and I think if the Huskers are going to get off to a good start, whether it's in a series, whether it's in a tournament, at any point down the line, Olson's kind of going to be the guy that sets the table.
Right. Here's the guy that's been coming out pitching the first game of every series. And now White Sox elite product from here in Chicago. But Emmett Olson has lost 2 of the last 3 starts going into these last 3 Big Ten series. So I feel like, again, for Nebraska, where they're winning series, if Emmett can come out and pitch the way he did earlier, if he can be that big presence, that big lefty that gets you 7, maybe 8 innings, again, it's going to be confidence not only to win this series, but also to get into the Big Ten feeling really good about Nebraska overall pitching staff.
Minnesota is trying to get in to the Big Ten tournament, and to do it, they don't necessarily have to sweep this weekend, but they have to come awfully close, and they need to get
a lot bit of help. Yep.
So for that to be the case, obviously their pitching staff needs to step up big time for John Anderson as well.
Well, and so my pitcher, Tucker Novotny, I mean, I love this big lefty who has come out in the last 2 weeks, has beaten a Michigan team and beaten a Maryland team. So he has stepped up. Not great overall record, not great ERA, but definitely doing well. 76 strikeouts, 36 walks. He started to find his rhythm, and if he can come out and be that first starter for that roster, for that team, if he can win that first game, he's giving Minnesota a belief that if they can win the next 2, they have an outside chance. Still needs some help, but he has to win.
I'm not counting out any John Anderson coach team until the math tells me that I have to count them out, and they won't be part of the Big Ten tournament next week starting on Tuesday in Omaha. We know Rutgers will be part of that tournament. What we don't know is if the Scarlet Knights head to Omaha needing to win the league's auto bid to get into the NCAA tournament.
Right, and so I kind of, as a pitchers to watch, I'm actually putting 2 guys down here, Drew Conover and Justin Sinibaldi. Feel like Rutgers right now has found their rhythm, especially with Christian Capella leading, starting that first game of every series. But these 2 guys have also been a little bit inconsistent, especially Justin Sinibaldi. What's been really nice is the last weekend, Sinibaldi did really well. The weekend before, Conover did really well. So regardless of what happens in the first game as we head into the series here, end of the season here, these 2 guys, if they can step up and they can pitch the way they have, at some points this year. Now, again, I feel like you're going to end the regular season on a really positive note and leading into the Big Ten tournament.
Rutgers has already won 7 of their last 8. How fun, by the way, is this last weekend? We got a race at the top. We got a race for the top 8. We got a race to the at-large teams.
This is what you want in the Big Ten. A lot of parity, some really good teams that you would kind of expect, and then so much fun in the middle that every series has some significant.
Final weekend drama, and by the way, everybody gets Sunday off because the Big Ten tournament's starting a day earlier, so the Big Ten regular season ends a day earlier on Saturday. For Mike Huff, I'm Rick Pizzo. Thanks to our guests, Taryn Kern, Matthew Wilkinson, Jeff Tambroni, all for being part of this edition of Big Ten Today, and we hope to see you again on Thursday.